She watched others play then. The human mechanic handed her a new life. She sat behind a broken metal fence, watching the others run. Their feet kicked up yellow dust as they laughed and chased one another. Some of them jumped high, spinning in the air, while others played with glowing balls that bounced without touching the ground. The sun above was soft and orange, casting long shadows across the cracked playground. But none of those shadows belonged to her. Her name was Sari, and her legs had not moved since she was 4 cycles old. Now she was 12, maybe 13. She had stopped counting. Her bones were thin, like dry branches, and her skin had the soft blue tone of her species. A long shawl covered her lower body, but everyone knew what lay under it. Nothing that worked, nothing that mattered. The other children never spoke to her. Sometimes they looked, just for a second, then quickly turned away. Some whispered to each other and giggled. Others looked at her with pity, as if she was already gone, already buried, and the adults. They didn't even see her anymore. She had become a part of the fence, part of the background, part of the forgotten. Sari's mother had died years ago. Her father had once tried to build her a chair with wheels, but it broke within a week. After that, he gave up. Now, he spent his time drinking bitter root water and watching old war programs on the small holoscreen. He never asked how she was, and she had stopped hoping he would. She didn't cry anymore. Crying was for those who still believed someone might come. She had learned to stay quiet, still, and invisible, until one day, something different happened. It was the sound that caught her attention first. Not the usual humming of the village tech, not the yelling of kids, but a low, smooth hum, and the clink-clank of tools hitting metal. She turned her head slightly and saw someone walking toward her side of the fence. It was a human. She had seen humans before, mostly on screens, rarely in person. They were strange, with soft round faces, small ears, and thick eyebrows. This one was wearing a brown jacket, with black gloves. Grease stains covered his shirt, and something heavy rattled on his back. A toolbox. Maybe. He wasn't young, but not old either, and he looked tired, like someone who had fixed too many things and not rested enough. He didn't pass by her. He stopped, only a few steps away, looked at her directly, and smiled. Not a fake smile, not the kind people gave out of guilt, but a small, curious smile, as if he had found something interesting, something worth stopping for. "Hey," he said in a voice warm like fresh tea, "you like watching them play?" Sari blinked, unsure if he was talking to her. No one asked her anything, not anymore. Still, she nodded slowly, not knowing why. "Thought so," the man said, kneeling down and placing a large crate beside her. It made a soft humming sound, like it was alive. He didn't open it, just rested a hand on top of it, and looked at her legs. She flinched a little, expecting the usual comment. Maybe a question, or even a sad headshake. But he didn't do any of that. Instead, he whispered, "Looks like someone's been waiting to fly," and with that, he stood up again, gave her a wink, and walked away. Sari sat frozen, heart pounding, unsure what had just happened. She looked down at the crate, then back at the fading figure of the human. Why had he come to her? Why had he brought that box? And what did he mean by fly? The sun began to set, painting the sky in colors she didn't know how to name. But even with the day ending, something had started, something quiet but strong inside her chest. A whisper, a question, a new feeling she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. And behind the fence, the girl who had only ever watched, now had something in front of her, something strange, something heavy, something waiting, maybe, just maybe. Her story was not over yet. The crate stayed beside her the whole night, softly glowing in the dark like a sleeping animal. Sari didn't touch it, not yet. She watched it the way someone watches lightning from far away, amazed, curious, but also a little scared. The other children had gone home. The courtyard was quiet, and only the soft wind moved the dust. But Sari didn't move, her eyes locked on that mysterious box. She didn't know the human's name, or why he had spoken to her. Maybe it was a joke, some kind of trick. Maybe he felt sorry for her. But his eyes hadn't looked like pity. No one ever left her a gift, especially not something that buzzed and pulsed like it held secrets. Sari's fingers itched to open it, to see what waited inside, but her fear held her back. What if it was dangerous? What if it was nothing? What if it was hope and then nothing again? She had been broken for so long that she forgot what it felt like to be curious. Morning came slowly, painting gold on the stone ground. Children returned, chasing each other past her usual spot, and this time, they noticed the box. They didn't come close, just stared from a distance. Whispers floated in the air. Why did he give it to her? Is it some kind of joke? No one came near. Sari didn't answer them, didn't care what they thought. Her attention stayed on the box and on the sound behind her. The human had returned, same jacket, same tired eyes, but this time with a small tool belt around his waist. He walked up to her and crouched down beside the crate. No one opened it. He asked softly. Sari shook her head. Good, he said, tapping the top, gently. It's waiting for you. Then he stepped back, giving her space, giving her time. She looked at him, searching his face for lies, for tricks, for anything cruel. But he just smiled again, and that smile felt like a light in a cold cave. Her fingers moved slowly toward the edge of the crate. The moment she touched it, the box responded with a soft click. It unlocked, steam curling out from the corners like a breath. Inside was not one thing, but many metal rods, coils, pieces shaped like bones, and wires that pulsed with blue light. It looked like a puzzle, like a machine, but one made not for the ground, not for buildings, for someone like her. Sari stared, speechless. Her hands hovered over the parts, afraid to break them. The human moved beside her and opened a small screen, showing a diagram. It looked like legs, not normal ones, but legs with power, with shape, with strength. She couldn't believe it. He wanted to build her new legs. Her throat felt dry, her chest heavy. Why? She asked in a soft whisper. Why me? The human didn't look away, didn't hesitate. Because you deserve to play, he said, not just watch. His words hit her harder than she expected. No one had said anything like that to her before, not in years, not even once. She tried to speak again, but no sound came out. Instead, she nodded, just once. And the human began. He laid the parts out with care, explaining each one in simple words. This joint moves the knee. This plate carries the weight. This chip learns your balance. He didn't rush, didn't treat her like a problem. He treated her like a partner, like someone who mattered. People began to gather again, watching from a distance, some curious, some angry, some just confused, but the human ignored them, and so did Sari. Her world had become the crate, the tools, and the dream being built in front of her. It was the first time she had ever seen someone build something just for her, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. As the sun climbed higher, the pieces began to take shape. Not yet legs, but the idea of legs, the possibility of movement, and deep inside her, a small fire began to grow. It was weak, yes, but real. She didn't understand everything yet. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a box of metal. It was the beginning of a new story, and this time, she would not be the one sitting behind the fence. She would be the one others watched, the one who rose, even if her steps were slow, even if her legs were made of steel. She would walk, and no one would stop her again. The sun was already halfway down the sky when Sari first heard the sound. Not the wind, not the hum of passing carts, or the soft chimes of the market nearby. This sound was sharp, tiny sparks, snapping like angry insects. She looked down at the open pieces scattered before her, and realized the human wasn't just talking anymore. He was working, fast, but focused. Like every bolt and wire mattered. He sat cross-legged in the dirt, sleeves rolled up, sweat clinging to his forehead. Each part he picked up, he inspected with care, then adjusted it with gentle hands. The tools moved like they knew her story already. He didn't ask her to smile, didn't promise miracles. But every time their eyes met, he gave a nod, like saying, "We're doing this together." The children stopped playing, their voices quiet now. Even the adults, who once hurried past her without a glance, began to slow down. They didn't know what the human was doing, but they knew it was something new, something that shouldn't be happening, not here, not for her. One older woman shook her head and whispered, "She's not meant to walk," someone else muttered. "Waste of effort." Sorry, heard every word, but she didn't look up. Her eyes were locked on the sparks flying from the human's tools and the small glowing core he had just placed into a thin steel frame. It was beginning to look like a leg, not a perfect one, not like the soft limbs others were born with, but it was solid, strong, shaped like it could carry her over rocks, over dirt, maybe even into the air. Her breath caught in her throat. Could this really be for her? Was she really going to stand one day, not just in dreams, but here, on this dusty ground? The human noticed her staring and offered her a small piece, a curved plate no longer than her hand, warm to the touch. "Want to help?" he asked her. Hands shook as she took it, but she nodded. He guided her, showing her where to place it on the inner joint. Her fingers struggled at first, unsure and clumsy. But he didn't laugh, didn't scold. He waited, then smiled when she got it right. "There," he said. "You're building your own legs." No one had ever given her power like that. Not even the chance to try. Now, she wasn't just a broken girl watching the world move on without her. She was part of the creation, part of something bigger than her pain. They worked through the afternoon. One side of the leg came together, first a mix of dark gray and silver, thin wires moving like veins. It was heavier than she expected. But the human assured her that weight meant strength. He adjusted the frame with a soft tool that hummed when pressed. Then came the moment he brought the leg closer to her body. Her heart raced, chest tight. She hadn't been touched below the waist in years. Not by anyone trying to help. She looked away, afraid, but his hands were calm, careful. He spoke as he worked, not about her condition, but about the machine, about balance, pressure, movement. He made her forget she was being fixed. It felt like she was being upgraded. There was a quiet click, and the joint snapped into place. She gasped, not in pain, but in surprise. It felt connected. She couldn't move it yet, but it was there, attached, real, hers. People whispered louder now. Some even walked away, shaking their heads in disapproval. But others stayed, watching in silence. They had never seen someone like her be treated like this. Not a burden, not a lost cause, but a girl with a future being built in front of their eyes. The human finally stood up, stretching his back. "One leg today," he said, wiping grease from his palms. "Tomorrow, we test it." Then he looked at her, and something soft flickered in his voice. "You did good, partner." Sorry felt her throat tighten. No one had ever called her that before, partner. Not child, not burden, not broken partner. As the sky darkened and lights blinked on across the street, she sat there quietly. The steel leg rested beside her, ready, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel stuck. She felt close, so close to a world that had always been on the other side of the fence. The night was restless, but not because of fear or sadness. Sorry couldn't sleep. Not with the metal leg resting beside her like a sleeping animal. She had never owned anything this important. Never felt this heavy with hope. Every few minutes, she reached out to touch it, just to make sure it was real. The surface was cool, the joints stiff, but it hummed faintly when her fingers brushed across it. Outside, the wind picked up, sending loose dust into tiny spirals. She pulled her thin shawl tighter, but her eyes stayed wide open. Tomorrow, the human said. Tomorrow they would try to make it move. Her heart beat faster, just thinking about it. At dawn, she was already awake when she heard his footsteps. The slow, steady crunch of boots on stone. He carried another small crate and had a mug in his hand, steam rising from it. Didn't sleep, did you? He asked with a tired smile. Sari shook her head and smiled back for the first time. Even if it was small, he sat beside her, sipped his drink, then opened the crate. Inside were soft straps, a tiny control module, and something that looked like a skin-colored covering. This part isn't for walking, he said. It's for comfort. One by one, he began fitting the new leg to her body. The weight was strange at first, pulling her hips to one side, but the harness helped balance it, and the support belt wrapped snugly around her waist. Then came the switch, a small button on the control chip near her hip. Ready? He asked. She hesitated, hand hovering near the button. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed it. A jolt ran through her lower body, not pain, but heat. The leg buzzed, adjusted, shifted. She gasped as the artificial muscles inside it tightened. Gently. Then the foot lifted, just an inch off the ground. Her leg had moved. The human caught her before she toppled, holding her shoulders steady. It's learning your weight, he said calmly. Let it listen to you. Sari gritted her teeth and focused. She leaned forward, shifting her weight slowly. The mechanical limb responded, shaky at first, then firmer. She lifted herself off the ground, just a little, but enough that both knees bent in the same direction. She was standing not well, not balanced but standing. A small sound escaped her lips, something between a laugh and a sob. It wasn't graceful, and it wasn't fast, but it was real, and it was hers. They practiced slowly, minute by minute, step by tiny step. She fell once, twice, and again, each time. The human picked her up gently and adjusted the limb. No frustration, no blame, just patience. You're doing better than most soldiers I've trained, he said with a wink. She didn't understand the joke, but it made her smile again. A few children gathered nearby, silent now, not mocking, not giggling. One of them whispered, "Is she really walking?" Another one answered, "Kind of, yeah." And slowly, more began to gather. Even the grumpy vendor from across the street came out to watch, arms crossed, eyes curious. But not everyone was impressed. A tall elder in deep red robes stepped forward, his voice cold. "This is not our way," he said. "You defy the old code." Sari flinched, suddenly afraid. She had heard this voice before, years ago. He had called her broken, unworthy of temple blessings. He had told her father to stop wasting resources on her. But before she could say a word, the human stepped in front of her. "She deserves to live like anyone else," he said, firm and steady. "She deserves to run, to fall, to play, and to be seen." The elder narrowed his eyes. "You bring weakness into our world," he hissed. The human didn't flinch. "No," he replied. "I'm showing you strength you chose to ignore." The elder scoffed and turned away. But his words didn't matter now, because as the crowd watched, Sari took one full step on her own, then another, her metal leg moving in rhythm with her breath. The wind picked up again, but it didn't feel cold this time. It felt alive, full of motion, and for the first time in her life, so did she. The next morning, the ground felt different beneath her, not because the dirt had changed, or the wind was warmer, but because she stood on it, not just as a watcher, but as someone who could move. Sari sat at the edge of her bed, metal legs stretching out before her, humming quietly with every breath she took. The human had told her it needed rest too, like a sleeping pet. She didn't really believe that, but she found herself whispering thank you to it anyway. Outside, the voices of children filled the air again. Sari's chest tightened, not with fear this time, but something new, hope, mixed with doubt. Would they laugh? Would they run away? Would they let her join them, even for one game? She had no answers, but her body moved on its own, slowly rising from the bed. The metal leg clicked into place and supported her with a quiet whir. The human was already waiting. Outside, crouched beside a strange-looking wheel cart with padded bars and lights. He gave her a small nod, as if this was all perfectly normal. "Time for round 2, he said. Sari took a shaky breath and stepped toward him. The limb responded better today, less twitchy, more balanced. The connection between her brain and the machine was becoming real, alive, hers. He walked beside her, not too fast, letting her find her rhythm. The other children were playing a game: kickball, tag, hovering, all the games she had only ever watched. When they saw her approach, the noise died down, one by one. They stopped running and stared. The silence cut deep, like a knife sliding through cloth. Sari felt her mouth go dry, her foot slowing down. She wanted to turn back, disappear, vanish, into the old shadows. But before she could take another step, a voice rang out, clear and surprised. "She's standing." It was a little boy with bright green eyes, probably younger than her. He walked forward without fear and circled around her, examining the leg like it was a new toy. "Cool," he said, pointing at the metal joint. "Does it fly?" Sari blinked, confused by the question. "No," she said quietly. "It walks." The boy shrugged. "Still cool." Then he turned to the others. "Let her play." It was that simple. The game started again, this time with her. They tossed her, the hovering slow and cautious. Her arms were strong, always had been, so she caught it easily and threw it back. The kids cheered, and the next round came faster, then a little faster. She couldn't run yet, but she pivoted, turned, Lind moved, and the metal leg moved with her. Like it had always been part of her body. She laughed freely, laughed for the first time in years. A sound so foreign to her own ears, she almost didn't recognize it. The human sat at a distance, watching quietly. He didn't interrupt, didn't step forward, but the small smile on his face said everything. He didn't want praise, he wanted her to have this. But the peace didn't last. As the sun began to set, another elder approached, different from the last, but wearing the same heavy robe. He didn't speak to Sari or the children. He walked directly to the human and said something in a low voice. Too quiet to hear. Whatever it was, it made the human's face tighten. Later, as the children ran off to their homes and Sari sat resting on a bench, the human walked up slowly. He crouched beside her again, like he always did, but this time, he looked tired in a different way. "They don't like what we're doing," he said softly. "They say it's not tradition." Sari looked down at her leg, her joy beginning to shake. "Will they take it?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. He shook his head. "Not if I can help it." Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a small, glowing stone, soft blue, shaped like a circle. "It's your ownership chip," he said, placing it in her hand. "This leg belongs to you now. It listens to your voice and no one else's." She stared at it, the light reflecting in her eyes. It felt warm, like proof she mattered, like no one could undo what she had earned. The stars began to rise, twinkling one by one. Sari looked up at them, leg humming gently beneath her, and whispered the words she never thought she'd say. "I want to walk farther tomorrow." And beside her, the human mechanic nodded. "Then we'll build the second leg next." The next day didn't begin with sunshine or laughter. It began with a banging on the mechanic's temporary shelter. Sari was already there, helping him clean the tools, when 3 guards in maroon armor stepped inside without knocking. Their expressions were hard, like carved stone, and their eyes went straight to her leg. One of them pointed. "That device violates Code 9, Section 4. The human didn't even flinch, just leaned back on his crate, arms crossed. "I didn't know kindness was illegal here," he said quietly. Another guard stepped forward, ignoring him and addressing Sari directly. "You've brought shame to your caste, girl," he spat. "You were born broken. You were meant to accept it." Sari's heart thundered in her chest, the sharp pain of old fear crawling back into her bones. But this time, she didn't cry, she didn't beg. She stood, slow and firm, using the metal leg for balance. "I didn't choose to be broken," she said. but I chose not to stay that way." The guard's face twisted in anger, and for a second, she thought he might strike her. But the human stepped between them, calm but dangerous. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, voice low like thunder before a storm. Silence stretched. Then, after a tense breath, the guards turned and left, robes snapping in the wind. Later that day, the mechanic spoke with quiet urgency. "They might return with more than words next time," he said. Sari looked at the tools, spread out across the workbench, then down at her leg. "I want the second one," she said, without hesitation. He raised an eyebrow. "It'll be harder. I'm not afraid." She whispered, "Not anymore. They worked faster this time." She helped now, not just as a learner, but as someone who understood the machine. Her fingers moved with more confidence. She recognized the coil shapes, the stabilizer pads, the micro-hydraulics that gave the joints their smooth motion. She was learning what made her strong. By nightfall, the second leg was nearly done. Her father came by once, stood at a distance, watched silently, then walked away without saying a word. She didn't call out to him. She had spent years hoping for his approval. Now, she didn't need it. The second leg was heavier, more advanced. This one had a pressure sensor in the foot and a stabilizer in the ankle to help her run. She pressed the core into the socket herself. It hissed to life with a satisfying click. And when she stood, this time it wasn't shaky. It was solid, powerful, like the ground itself wanted her to move. The human grinned and stepped back. "You're ready? Ready for what?" she asked, heart pounding. He pointed toward the hill beyond the village, a place she had never been, not even once. "Run," he said simply. "If they chase you again, they'll never catch you." Sari turned to the hill, eyes wide. She took one step, then another, and then the legs responded faster, smoother, stronger than she imagined. The wind hit her face as she broke into a run. Not a stumble, not a limp, an actual run. Children watched from rooftops, stunned. Some clapped, some cried. A few elders stood frozen, unable to deny what they saw. The girl they had cast aside was flying over the earth like a storm given legs. At the top of the hill, she stopped and looked back. Everything below her seemed smaller now, not just the buildings, but the voices that used to break her spirit. The fear, the shame, the silence, it was all far behind her. She had two legs, two machines powered by pain, love, and a human's kindness, and a heart that beat with the fire of someone who refused to be left behind. The wind danced across the hilltop, brushing gently against Sari's cheeks as she stood tall. Below her, the village looked different, now smaller, quieter, no longer towering over her. She wasn't the girl behind the fence anymore. She was the girl who had climbed beyond it. Her legs, one silver, one dark steel, buzzed quietly beneath her robes. Each step they took had its own voice now, soft but powerful. She took one slow breath, then turned back, toward the mechanic who had made it all possible. He stood at the base of the hill, arms crossed, smiling like a proud teacher. But their peace didn't last. Voices rose from the village, sharp, panicked, angry. The same elders who had warned the human, who had mocked her, were now shouting. A new group of guards followed close behind them, this time with larger weapons, glowing rods, and banners of command. At their front stood a tall figure with gold-threaded robes, an enforcer from the city sector. His face was hidden behind a smooth mask, but his voice boomed with cruel certainty. "This ends now." Sari didn't step back. She moved down the hill slowly, each movement controlled. She could have run, but she didn't. Not this time. The human walked beside her, saying nothing. His silence said everything. It was her choice now, her voice that would be heard. They stopped in the center of the courtyard, where everything had begun. The same dusty space where she once sat alone. The same ground that once held her still, now trembled under her steps. The enforcer pointed. "That technology is unauthorized, illegal under cultural law." "She was born broken," one elder added bitterly. It was her fate, and she chose a new one, the mechanic answered. Finally stepping forward, his voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a blade. You abandoned her, ignored her, punished her for existing. He pointed at Sari. She rose without you. Gasps followed his words. Even the enforcer paused, unsure how to answer. Sari stepped forward and faced them all. She didn't raise. Her voice didn't scream. She just spoke the truth. You said I wasn't meant to walk. You said I was shame, a waste, but you were wrong. I'm not your shame, I'm your mirror. And I'm not walking away, I'm walking forward. A silence, heavier than any storm, fell over the crowd. The enforcer lifted his staff, as if about to give a command. But before he could speak, a small child ran forward from the side, the same boy with green eyes from before. He stopped beside Sari and looked up at the enforcer. She walks better than any of us, he said boldly. Maybe it's time you catch up. The crowd stirred, whispers shifting into murmurs. Another child joined, then two more. Soon, a dozen children surrounded her, all staring back at the people who once decided who was worthy and who was not. The enforcer lowered his staff. Without a word, he turned and walked away. The elders followed, their robes dragging in the dirt like shadows being pulled back into the dark. Sari turned to the mechanic, her heart pounding like thunder trapped in her chest. She didn't know what would come tomorrow, but she knew something had changed today. Not just her legs, not just her path. The village had seen something it couldn't unsee. A girl once left behind, now leading. She sat with the human by the fire that night, quiet flames dancing between them. He handed her a small box, and inside it were tools, lightweight, sharp, and clean. Your turn to fix someone, he said, smiling. She looked at the tools, then at him, and whispered, I know who needs legs next. Because once, she was the girl behind the fence. Now, she was the one opening gates. And somewhere, in the eyes of another silent child watching from the shadows, a spark of hope was just beginning to rise.